The door swung open, and my heart stopped. I stood there, bare as the day I was born, my sketchbook barely covering me, while Ethemy, best friend, the golden boy of Willow Creek, froze in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock. In that split second, I braced for the worst: judgment, disgust, the end of everything we'd built over 17 years. But Ethan didn't turn away. He didn't laugh or recoil. Instead, his lips parted, and in a voice softer than I'd ever heard, he said, "Jamie, I need to tell you something." Those words hung in the air, heavy with a truth I couldn't yet grasp. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. We'd grown up inseparable in Willow Creek, a sleepy town in upstate New York where everyone knew everyone's business. Ethan Carter was the star quarterback, all broad shoulders and easy charm, the kind of guy who could make anyone laugh with a single grin. I was Jamie Harper, the quiet artist, always sketching in the margins of notebooks, always hiding a piece of myself. I'd known I was gay since I was 12, but in a town where different was a dirty word, I'd learned to keep it locked away. Ethan was the only one who ever made me feel like I didn't have to hide, not completely. Anyway, that afternoon, I'd been sketching in my room, lost in the lines of a portrait I'd been working on for weeks. Ethan's face, captured mid-laugh, his eyes crinkling in that way that made my chest ache. I hadn't heard the knock. I hadn't heard the creak of the floorboards. I'd been so caught up in the drawing that I didn't even notice I was still in my boxers until Ethan burst in. "Jesus, Jamie," he stammered, his cheeks flushing red as he averted his eyes. "Why didn't you lock the door?" "Too thought I did." I scrambled to yank a shirt from the floor, my face burning. "What are you even doing here? You're supposed to be at practice." He rubbed the back of his neck, still not looking at me. "Practice got canceled. Coach had a family thing. I just needed to talk to you." "Talk?" I clutched the shirt to my chest, my heart hammering. Ethan had never just needed to talk. He was the guy who shrugged off problems like they were nothing, who'd rather crack a joke than face anything real. "About what?" He hesitated, his gaze flickering to the sketchbook still open on my bed. The portrait of him stared back, unmistakable. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he'd bolt. But then he stepped closer, his voice low. "I saw you at the Pride rally last month. You didn't tell me you were going." My stomach dropped. The Pride rally had been my first, a secret trip to Albany with a few kids from the art club. I'd told Ethan I was visiting my cousin. "I didn't think you'd care," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I care," he said, and there was something raw in his tone, something that made my breath catch. "I care that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. I care that you've been carrying this alone." I didn't know what to say. Ethan had always been my safe place, but I'd never dared to hope he'd understand this part of me. Willow Creek wasn't kind to people like me last year. A kid got jumped just for wearing a rainbow pin. I'd spent years building walls, and now Ethan was standing there, threatening to tear them down with a single look. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, pulling the shirt over my head. I didn't know how to tell you." He took another step, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. "You don't have to hide from me, Jamie. Not ever." His eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, I saw something new in them, something that wasn't just friendship. The air between us crackled, heavy with unspoken questions. I wanted to ask what he meant, what he was feeling, but fear glued my tongue to the roof of my mouth. Ethan was straight. He'd dated half the cheerleading squad. This was Ethan, the guy who'd high-fived me after every touchdown, who'd snuck me beers at the lake last summer. He couldn't be saying what I thought he was saying. Could he? I've been thinking about you, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Not just as my friend. As more. The words hit like a tidal wave, washing away every defense I'd built. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the sketchbook like a lifeline. Ethan, you're not, you can't. I don't know what I am, he interrupted, his voice shaking. I just know that when I saw you at that rally, smiling, looking so free, it messed me up. I couldn't stop thinking about you. About us. Us. The word echoed in my head, impossible and intoxicating. I wanted to believe him, but doubt clawed at me. This was Willow Creek. This was Ethan Carter, the guy everyone loved. What would happen if anyone found out? What would happen to him? Ethan, I said, my voice cracking. You don't know what you're saying. This town, it'll eat you alive. I don't care about the town, he said, his eyes blazing. I care about you. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of his words settling like dust after a storm. I wanted to reach for him, to close the distance between us, but fear held me back. What if this was a mistake? What if he woke up tomorrow and regretted it? But then he reached out, his hand brushing mine, and the warmth of his touch silenced every doubt. I'm scared too, he whispered. But I'm not running from this. Not from you. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't either. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and hesitant touches, each one a step into uncharted territory. Ethan and I didn't talk about what he'd said, not directly, but it hung between us, a fragile thread we were both afraid to pull. Every time his hand lingered too long on my shoulder or his eyes caught mine across the cafeteria, my heart raced with a mix of hope and terror. Willow Creek wasn't ready for us. Hell, I wasn't sure we were ready for us. But Ethan had a way of making the impossible feel possible, like he could bend the world to his will with that damn smile of his. At school, he was still the golden boy, high-fiving teammates and charming teachers. But when we were alone in the bleachers after practice, in the quiet of my garage-turned art studio, there was a softness to him, a vulnerability that made me ache. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, we sat on the hood of his beat-up Chevy in the empty school parking lot. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and distant bonfires. I was sketching the outline of the old oak tree by the field, but my eyes kept drifting to Ethan, his profile sharp against the fading light. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked suddenly, his voice low. I paused, my pencil hovering over the page. All the time. Somewhere big, like New York City. Somewhere I can breathe. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. Would you take me with you? My breath caught. You're serious? He shrugged, but his eyes were intense. I don't know, Jamie. This town, it's home, but it's also a cage. I see how they look at you sometimes, like you're less because you're you. It makes me want to burn this place down. I laughed, but it was hollow. You'd miss the Friday night games, the bonfires, the whole King of Willow Creek thing. Maybe, he said, his voice softening. But I'd miss you more. The words hit harder than I expected, and I set my sketchbook down, my hands trembling. Ethan, what are we doing? You're not supposed to feel this way. Who says? He challenged, leaning closer. Who gets to decide what I'm supposed to feel? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was the way my heart pounded when he looked at me like that, like I was the only thing that mattered. But the weight of Willow Creek pressed down on us, whispers in the halls, eyes that lingered too long. I'd heard the slurs thrown at kids like me, seen the way parents clutched their crosses a little tighter when I walked by. Ethan might have been untouchable, but I wasn't. And if we crossed this line, he wouldn't be either. That night, we drove to the lake, a place we'd gone 100 times before, but it felt different now. The water was still, reflecting the stars like a mirror. We sat on the dock, our feet dangling over the edge, and for a while, we didn't speak. Then Ethan reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, and I felt like I could fly and fall all at once. I've never done this before, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Not with a guy. Not with anyone who mattered this much. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. You don't have to do this, Ethan. You can walk away. No one would know. He turned to me, his eyes fierce. I'd know. And I'm done pretending I don't feel this. Before I could respond, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was tentative at first, then desperate, like he'd been holding it back for years. It was everything I dreamed of and everything I feared, soft and searing, a promise and a risk. When we pulled apart, I was trembling, and so was he. We can't tell anyone, I said, my voice shaking. Not yet. I know, he said, his forehead resting against mine. But I'm not going anywhere. The next week was a tightrope walk. At school, we played our parts, Ethan the jock, me the artist, but every stolen moment felt like a rebellion. A brush of shoulders in the hallway. A shared glance during history class. A note slipped into my locker with his messy handwriting. Meet me at the oak tree after school. But Willow Creek had eyes everywhere. During lunch one day, I caught Jake, one of Ethan's teammates, watching us too closely, his mouth twisted in a smirk. Later, in the locker room, I overheard him muttering to another player. Carter's been weird lately. Always hanging with that fag. The word hit like a punch, but I kept my head down, pretending I hadn't heard. Ethan wasn't there, but I knew if he had been, he'd have shut Jake up. Or worse, he'd have outed himself trying. The thought made my stomach churn. I couldn't let him throw everything away not for me. That night, I told Ethan we needed to be more careful. We were in my garage, surrounded by half-finished canvases and the smell of paint thinner. He paced, his hands in his hair, frustration radiating off him. I hate this, he said. I hate sneaking around like we're doing something wrong. It's not about wrong, I said, my voice tight. It's about keeping you safe. If people find out, they'll tear you apart. Your team, your family. My family already knows something's up. He cut in. My dad keeps asking why I'm not chasing girls anymore. I don't know how to tell him. Then don't, I said, harsher than I meant. Not yet. Please, Ethan. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes soft but determined. I'm not ashamed of you, Jamie. I'm not ashamed of us. I wanted to believe him, but fear was a living thing inside me, clawing at my chest. I'd spent years hiding who I was, and now Ethan was ready to throw open the doors I'd kept locked. I loved him for it, but I hated what it could cost him. The tension in Willow Creek was building, a storm waiting to break. Ethan and I tried to keep things normal, but every touch, every look felt like a dare to the world. I started noticing things I hadn't before, whispers in the halls, glances that lingered too long. Jake and his crew were circling, their smirks sharper, their comments louder. One day, I found fag scrawled on my locker in black marker. I scrubbed it off before Ethan saw, but the word burned into my mind. Ethan noticed my silence, my fidgeting. "What's wrong?" he asked one night as we sat in his truck, parked on a dirt road outside town. The stars were bright, but they didn't feel like freedom anymore. "Nothing," I lied, staring at my hands. "Just school stuff." He didn't buy it. "Jamie, talk to me. You've been off all week." I wanted to tell him about the locker, about Jake, about the fear that kept me up at night, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I said, "What if this is a mistake? What if you regret this?" He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "Regret you? Jamie, you're the only thing that makes sense right now." His words should have warmed me, but they only tightened the knot in my chest. "You say that now, but what happens when your dad finds out? Or your team? You think they'll just cheer you on?" "I don't care about them," he said, his voice fierce. "I care about you." But I cared about him too much to let him lose everything. I'd seen what happened to kids who came out in Willow Creek. They didn't just lose friends. They lost families, futures. Ethan was on track for a football scholarship, a ticket out of this town. I couldn't be the reason he stayed trapped here. The next day, things got worse. I was in the art room, working on a mural for the spring festival, when Jake and two of his buddies walked in. The teacher was out, and the room was empty except for me. Jake leaned against a table, his grin sharp as a blade. "Drawing your boyfriend again, Harper," he said, nodding at the sketchbook open to a half-finished portrait of Ethan. My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice steady. "Get out, Jake." He laughed, stepping closer. "Heard you and Carter have been real close lately. What's that about? Huh? You turning him or something?" I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think I do," he said, his voice low and mean. "Whole team's talking about it. Carter's not himself. And we all know why." I wanted to hit him, to wipe that smirk off his face, but I knew it'd only make things worse. Before I could respond, the door opened, and Ethan walked in. His eyes flicked from me to Jake, and his expression darkened. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. Jake straightened, his grin widening. "Just chatting with your boy here. You two seem real tight these days." Ethan stepped closer, his shoulders squared. "You got a problem, Jake?" "Maybe I do," Jake said, crossing his arms. "Maybe I'm wondering why our star quarterback's spending all his time with him." The air crackled with tension, and for a moment, I thought Ethan might swing. But he didn't. Instead, he grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. "Let's go, Jamie." We didn't talk until we were outside, the cold air biting at my skin. Ethan's jaw was tight, his hands shoved in his pockets. "What did he say to you?" he asked. "Nothing I haven't heard before," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked. Ethan stopped walking and turned to me, his eyes blazing. "I'm not letting them talk to you like that. Not Jake. Not anyone. You can't fight the whole town, Ethan," I said, my throat tight. This is what I was afraid of. They're coming for you now, too. "Let them," he said, his voice low and fierce. "I'm not hiding anymore." That night, Ethan insisted on driving me home. We didn't talk much, but his hand rested on mine the whole way, a silent promise. When we pulled into my driveway, he leaned over and kissed me, quick but fierce, like he was staking a claim. I wanted to hold on to that moment, to believe it could last. But fear was a shadow I couldn't shake. The next morning, the school was buzzing. Someone had spray-painted "Carter's a fag" across the locker room wall. Ethan saw it before I did, and by the time I got there, he was scrubbing at it with a rag, his face red with anger. The team was watching, some smirking, some looking away. Jake stood in the corner, his arms crossed, his expression smug. "Ethan, stop," I said, grabbing his arm. "You're making it worse." He shook me off, his voice shaking. "I'm not letting them win." But they were winning. The whispers were louder now, the stares bolder. Ethan's teammates started icing him out, skipping him in drills, muttering behind his back. His dad, a former football star himself, started asking questions, his tone sharp and suspicious. I could see the cracks forming, the weight of it all pressing down on Ethan, and it killed me to know I was the cause. That weekend, we escaped to the lake again, the only place that still felt safe. We sat on the dock, the water lapping at the wood, and for a while, we pretended the world didn't exist. Ethan leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt the warmth of him, the strength that had always made me feel safe. "I love you," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. My heart stopped. I turned to him, my eyes burning. "Ethan, I mean it," he said, his voice steady. "I don't know what this means for me, for us, but I know I love you." I wanted to say it back, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I kissed him, pouring everything I couldn't say into that moment. But even as I held him, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. The storm broke on Monday. Ethan and I were walking to class when Jake and his crew cornered us in the hallway. The air was thick with tension, students lingering, sensing a fight. Jake stepped forward, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, Carter," he sneered, "you gonna tell us what's up with you and Harper? Or we gotta figure it out ourselves?" Ethan's fists clenched, but I grabbed his arm, my heart pounding. "Ethan, don't." He shook me off, stepping toward Jake. "You got something to say? Say it." Jake laughed, his eyes glinting with malice. "Everyone's talking. Man, you're not fooling anyone. You and your little boyfriend here." Ethan swung before Jake could finish, his fist connecting with Jake's jaw. The hallway erupted, kids shouting, phones coming out to record. I tried to pull Ethan back, but he was a force of nature, his anger spilling over. Jake stumbled, then lunged, and soon they were on the floor, a tangle of fists and curses. Teachers broke it up, hauling Ethan and Jake to the principal's office. I followed, my stomach churning, knowing this was only the beginning. By lunch, the video was everywhere in phones, on social media, tagged with slurs and hashtags that made my skin crawl. Ethan was suspended for 3 days, and Jake got off with a warning, his dad being the school board president. When Ethan came back, he was quieter, his usual spark dimmed. His dad had grounded him, taken his phone, and told him to get his head straight. The team had benched him for the next game, a first in his career. I could see the toll it was taking, the way his shoulders slumped, the way he avoided my eyes. "We need to talk," I said one night, sitting in my garage. The air smelled of paint and turpentine, a comfort that felt hollow now. Ethan didn't look at me. "I know what you're gonna say." "Then you know why," I said, my voice breaking. "This is destroying you, Ethan. Your team, your family turning on you because of me." "Not because of you," he said, his voice fierce. "Because of them. Because they can't handle the truth." "What truth?" I snapped, frustration boiling over. That you're throwing away everything for something you're not even sure of. He stood, his eyes blazing. I'm sure of you, Jamie. I've never been more sure of anything. I wanted to believe him, but the weight of the world was crushing us. You're losing everything, I said, tears burning my eyes. Your scholarship, your future, I don't care about that. He shouted, then softened, stepping closer. I care about you. I love you. Those words again, so raw, so real. I wanted to hold on to them, but fear was stronger. I love you too, I whispered, the first time I'd said it out loud. But I can't let you do this. Not for me. He reached for me, but I stepped back, my heart breaking. Jamie, please, I'm leaving, I said, the words tearing me apart. After graduation, I'm going to New York. Alone. He stared at me, his face crumpling. You don't mean that. I do, I said, forcing the words out. You deserve better than this town, Ethan. Better than me. I turned away, unable to look at him, and walked back to my house. That night, I cried until I couldn't breathe, the sketchbook of Ethan's face soaked with tears. I thought I was saving him, but it felt like I was killing myself. The weeks that followed were agony. Ethan tried to talk to me, but I kept my distance, throwing myself into my art, into college applications, into anything that would keep me from falling apart. The town didn't let up slurs painted on my locker. Notes slipped into my bag, whispers following me everywhere. Ethan's teammates shunned him, and his dad's disappointment was a constant shadow. But he didn't back down. He showed up at my house, left notes in my mailbox, sat outside my window until I couldn't ignore him. One night, I found him on my porch, his face bruised from a fight I hadn't heard about. I'm not giving up, he said, his voice steady despite the pain. Not on you. Not on us. I wanted to scream, to tell him to stop, but instead, I let him in. We sat on my bed, the sketchbook between us, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Me too, he said, his hand finding mine. But we're stronger than this town. Stronger than their hate. I wanted to believe him, but the world felt so big, so cruel. Graduation was 3 months away, and I didn't know if we'd make it that far. But as he held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin, I felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rewrite our story. Spring came to Willow Creek, but the air still felt heavy with winter's chill. Ethan and I clung to each other in stolen moments, late-night drives, quiet hours in my garage, whispers under the stars. We were careful, but not careful enough. The town was a pressure cooker, and we were the spark. One afternoon, I was working on the Spring Festival mural when Ethan burst into the art room, his face pale. My dad knows, he said, his voice shaking. He found one of your sketches in my room. My heart sank. Ethan's dad, Coach Carter, was a man carved from the same stone as Willow Creek, unyielding, traditional, proud. What did he say? I asked, my voice barely steady. He called me a disappointment, Ethan said, his eyes glistening. Told me to fix this or get out. I felt like I'd been punched. Ethan, I'm so sorry. Don't. He cut me off, his voice fierce. This isn't your fault. It's his. It's this damn town. But it was my fault. If I hadn't let him in, if I hadn't let myself love him, he'd still be the golden boy, untouched by this town's venom. You should go, I said, my throat tight. Go to college. Play football. Live the life you were meant to. He grabbed my shoulders, his eyes blazing. The life I was meant to. Jamie, you're the life I want. Before I could respond, the door swung open, and Coach Carter stood there, his face a mask of fury. Ethan, outside. Now. Ethan didn't move. No. I'm done hiding. Coach's eyes flicked to me, and the disgust in them made my skin crawl. You. He spat. You did this to my son. Dad. Stop. Ethan said, stepping between us. This isn't about Jamie. It's about me. I love him. The words hung in the air, a declaration that felt like a bomb. Coach's face went red, then white. You don't know what you're saying, he growled. You're confused. He's confused you. I'm not confused, Ethan said, his voice steady. I know exactly who I am. Coach grabbed Ethan's arm, but Ethan pulled free, standing tall. If you can't accept me, that's on you, he said. But I'm not changing for you or anyone. Coach stormed out, leaving a silence that felt like a wound. Ethan turned to me, his eyes wet but resolute. I meant it, he said. I'm not going back. That night, Ethan stayed at my house, his dad's ultimatum ringing in our ears. My mom, who'd always known I was gay but never pushed, welcomed him without question, setting up the guest room with a quiet understanding. But sleep didn't come. We lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, our hands intertwined. What happens now? I asked, my voice small. We leave, he said simply. After graduation, we go to New York. Together. I turned to him, my heart racing. You'd give up everything. Your scholarship, your family. I'm not giving up anything, he said, his eyes locked on mine. I'm choosing you. Graduation came like a lifeline. The ceremony was a blur of caps and gowns, but Ethan and I found each other after, our hands brushing in the chaos. The town hadn't changed, whispers still followed us, and Coach Carter didn't show what we had. We were stronger, braver, ready to face whatever came next. We packed my old hatchback with everything we owned, me sketchbooks, Ethan's football gear, a few clothes, and drove to New York City. The skyline rose like a promise, glittering against the night sky. We found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, barely big enough for two, but it was ours. Ethan got a job at a gym, and I enrolled in art school, my sketches filling with new faces, new dreams. Willow Creek faded, but its scars lingered. Ethan's dad never called, and the team never reached out. But we built a new family, friends who celebrated us, a community that didn't flinch at our love. We went to pride rallies together, Ethan's hand in mine, his smile brighter than ever. I painted him 100 times, laughing, sleeping, staring at the stars, and each stroke felt like a vow. One night, as we sat on our fire escape, the city humming below, Ethan pulled me close. You changed me, he said, his voice soft. You made me brave. I smiled, my heart full. You made me whole. We weren't perfect. We fought. We doubted. We stumbled. But we never stopped choosing each other. And in that choice, we found a truth stronger than any town, any hate. Love doesn't just survive, it thrives, rewriting the world one heartbeat at a time.